Hey, how you doing there again, folks? Me again, of course, Brandon Wenzel. Come back at you with another confession off my Concert Confession series. Yes, indeed, folks. Concert Confession series is a vlog series I've been doing for a little while now. I go over there and I talk about concerts and other live events that I've recently attended and basically just go over there and yammer on about stuff for a while. It's an opportunity for me to go over there and confess my concert sins, recount my recreational revelries, and muse over my musical misadventures. Basically, it's just an opportunity for me to go over there and soapbox and say, look at these fun things I did. But we'll get to that. Folks, it is a super simple format. I'm going to go over there and yammer on about it for a bit. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm inside my back room today, which means we had Peter Can Thunderbolt poster back there. Ooh, Peter Can Thunderbolt poster. Whilst I'm doing all that, folks, I am doing something else. I just so happen to be wearing a super cool shirt. Folks, when I wear super cool shirts, I always like to highlight the super cool shirt. What super cool shirt am I wearing for you today? Happens to be my Spine Shank shirt. Yeah! And actually, this particular shirt, comes via my previous Concert Confessions episode. If you're unfamiliar with the band Spine Shank, they're a band out of California that they've actually been around for quite a while, albeit with some extended hiatus time in there. Specifically, they took like 13 years off. They weren't really doing anything. They kind of dropped off. But I was fortunate enough. They decided to go over there and reform and actually go out on tour. And so the last concert I was at, aside from this one obviously, was going out to see them when they were performing with the Union Underground on tour. And it was a great time. If you want my recounting of that, I have a Concert Confessions episode about that. I also have videos of their performance I attended. Said videos are on my channel, just in case maybe you want to check them out. But anyway, what am I doing for you today, folks? What are we doing here? Concert Confessions, all that stuff. Yes, indeed, folks, this is Concert Confessions, episode number 16, concert number 189. We're getting so close to 200. But yes, indeed. So for this Concert Confession series that I do, I have sort of a format that I like to go off of, but I'll talk a little bit, open up the scenery, if you will. So this particular show was, the headliners were a band called Escape the Fate. You also had a band called Renesans. You had a band called Nini. I guess they're a band. I don't know exactly what the hell. But they had a performance called Nini, and then they also had an opener, local opener called Soulkiller. Let's talk about the stuff, right? So going off the format, I always like to start off by talking about the venue. In this case, it was at the WC Social Club in West Chicago, which is a venue that I am enormously familiar with. I have been to more shows at this point in my life at the WC Social Club than any other venue. They're a great spot. They're not too far from where I live. It's a little bit of a trek, but it's not too bad. They're a great spot for bands that, probably aren't going to, sell out a theater or anything like that, but at the same time are bigger than, just your local, bar and grill type of stage and stuff like that. They're good for sort of, lower medium tier bands. And I like it. It's a great spot. They have a great space. Even just the area that they're in. West Chicago is a great little town. And on top of that, it has a cool little setup. It's in a sort of a strip mall type of location. They got some good restaurants over there I've, partaken in over the years. The venue itself, like I said, I like the layout of it. I have talked about its virtues and failings, and I will bring some of those up in this. But overall, it's a nice venue. I'm always happy when I see that there's going to be a show there, partially because, again, just distance-wise, it's not too bad. But also because it's a nice spot. And, it has that advantage where it is sort of almost kind of a community spot, It's not out in Chicago where you have lots of different, venues vying for position. It's out in West Chicago, and it's, kind of, at this point, sadly, one of the relatively few venues that sort of houses these type of, shows. So, definitely, it's a solid venue. Does have its faults, and like I said, I will talk about that as I go forward. But anyway, let's talk about the bands, because that's really the meat of this whole thing. So the first band up, I should mention, going into this, the only reason why I was there was to see Nini. And I'll talk more about that when I get to that section, but I didn't know any of these other bands. So going into this, everything else was, was raw. And when the first band came up, no idea who they were. Again, they're a band called Soulkiller. And like right from the get-go, I was kind of excited because, they had some lighting effects set up and everything, and I was like, okay, it seems like they got some, some production value on their side. I like that. Mind you, that's not a deal breaker or anything, but it's nice to see. And true to form, like, not only were they really good, but they actually perfectly hit for me. For one thing, they actually had a theatrical element to their band. They had sort of a very industrial, sort of futuristic theme. So two of the members, the bassist and the guitarist, came out like wearing basically sort of like futuristic, sort of like almost SWAT gear type of stuff, like kind of, future police type of stuff. They had masks and everything. Stuff that you would see like in a dystopian, future movie, especially back in like the late 80s or early 90s. Even the lead singer, he had like a sort of techno trench coat kind of look and everything, and had like some kind of like makeup kind of coming down the one side of his face. The drummer was the one offset guy who, it's like, he did have a little bit of theming, but he was mostly just the drummer, and that's not to knock him. It was just funny, in regards to everybody else. But no, they fucking killed it. Like, I really like their stuff. I love industrial metal, and so that immediately hit for me. And I also like the fact that the lead singer, he used a variety of different vocal styles, which was cool. He definitely has some range on him, and just in general, like talking back to the drummer, fucking drummer was killing it, man. And all the members, like, they were really good at not only doing what they were doing, but hyping up the crowd to the extent where, even though they were the openers, that's a tough gig. You're trying to get everybody psyched up for the rest of the show. They definitely had the crowd on their side. Like, they brought a ton of energy. They were really good at working the crowd, and it was fucking great. And then, they had like some lighting effects and stuff like that to kind of, help emphasize things. They even had like some vocal effects for, some of the vocal parts and stuff. It was really cool, man. Like, I fucking loved it. I love theatrical bands. I love bands with a theme, and I love industrial metal, so it all fucking hit. On top of that, it turns out they're a local band. I actually somehow had never run into these guys before, but I loved it, man. Like, they were my find of the night, because like I'd never seen them before, never heard of them before, but they killed it, and I was absolutely. After their set, I went over there. I talked a little bit with the lead singer, a guy named Dave, and he was extremely cool. Hopefully, I'll be seeing them again relatively soon. Excuse me. Because I really enjoyed what they were doing. I thought they were phenomenal. Moving on to the second band, which was, again, and I'm not exactly sure if it's a band or how it works, but it was called Nini. Nini. Now, Nini, from my perspective, I know her from her YouTube career. She goes over there, she's a Taiwanese folk player who uses a mix of traditional and sort of not as traditional, like Asian Chinese instrumentation, and then goes over there and incorporates it into more sort of Western and contemporary styles. She does like covers of, like metal songs. They've had stuff from System of a Down, Zombie by the Cranberries, stuff like that. And I got into her stuff sometime last year in 2024. I love that sort of folk metal vibe. I've been into, for years, I've loved the Yoshida Brothers. Of course, you've got Bloodywood, who I'm a huge fan of. Ottokin, they're fucking awesome too. Of course, you have like The Who, Tangar Cavalry. Sadly, they're no longer around, but I love that fusion of styles, man. I think that's always such a cool way to do that. And she would eventually go on to gain greater recognition. She was on America's Got Talent, and certainly, created a bit of buzz. So when I saw that originally she was and still is on tour with a band called Galactic Empire, who I've actually seen at the WC Social Club a few years ago. But for this particular date, Galactic Empire was doing a different show at a different location, so she got on this tour, so she could go over there and, have a show. And I didn't know what to expect going in. I was just super psyched because I, love her stuff. And it ended up thoroughly exceeding my expectations. Part of that is because, again, I didn't know what to expect when it came to what the performance was going to be. I didn't know if she was just going to go out as a solo artist and then like work with a backing track or maybe a drum machine or something like that, how that whole thing was going to go. Or if she was going to have accompanying musicians, was she going to go over there and, stand there stoically playing the more traditional stuff, whereas, having more sort of, again, contemporary musicians, were they going to be more bombastic? How is it going to go? What it ended up being was a full fucking band experience, complete with costumes and theming and like just the whole thing. And they were fucking awesome. And I loved it. Like, it didn't feel... Sometimes you get bands like this where like clearly there's one member of the band who the focal point is on, and it just happens. And sometimes it feels like there's a huge disconnect between that person and the rest of the band that's accompanying them. But that wasn't the case here. Like, they felt like a fully, infused band. I don't know if that's going to be her band forever or how that whole thing works. For my money, I would love to see them stay in that incarnation because I think everybody was badass. It allowed them to go over there and have a mix of vocal styles because Nini herself would go over there and sing for certain things. Other songs would be purely instrumental, but then they also had their bassist who would go over there and he would go over there and he would provide like harsher vocals and stuff. So you had a mix of vocal styles. It was really cool. And as for Nini herself, like I said, part of my head was like, maybe again it'll be more stoic and in relation to the other members. But that wasn't the case at all. Like, she was 100% in it with them. When they were going over there, they had multiple times where you have like the guitarist, the bassist, and then Nini, performing on her instrument, all grouped together, just fucking rocking out. And it was so fucking cool, man. I was smiling the entire time. So much fun. As great as Soulkiller was, and again, they were my find of the night, Nini was definitely the band of the night for me. Like, flat fucking out. And I was, I didn't know how the crowd was going to respond to this, what the support level was going to be. The crowd was 100% on their side. Like, they just went for it. They were eating it up. And even in terms of the support level, I don't know how many people were there specifically to see her besides myself, but there were at least a few other people. I did see one guy wearing a Nini shirt. There was one guy who I was standing next to during her performance, and he was definitely into it. And there was even this one Asian girl who went over there and was speaking, I don't know if it's Mandarin or Cantonese, one of those, but she went over there and was speaking one of those to Nini herself, which was a cool little thing. But it was so much fucking fun. They did a mix of original songs and then also a couple covers. In fact, they did a cover of like that famous surf song. I don't know the name of it off the top of my head, like Misserloo or some shit like that. That you've all heard it. It was badass. They ended up, I don't know if they finished with it or not, but they went over there. They did a cover of "Hit Me Baby One More Time" by Britney Spears, which was a shitload of fun, and the crowd was. I loved it. It was so much fun. Let's talk about the third band, though. Third band was a band called Renesans. I'd never heard of Renesans. And, I didn't know, was this going to be, like with Soulkiller, where like, all right, cool, I've got another favorite band to go off of, or what it was going to be. And for what it was, they were very good. However, I did not immediately become like the biggest, Renaissance fan after the whole thing. Like, they did a really good job. Lots of energy. They were definitely the heaviest band of all of them. In fact, like, that was kind of a cool thing where they had this nice mix of, because like Nini's not a super heavy band. Soulkiller had, some heaviness, but Renesans was definitely the heaviest band. They were fucking throwing down. And I definitely dug their whole thing, man. It was really cool. The lead singer had like one of the... And I say this as somebody who this is my hairline, so, but he had like the one of the worst haircuts I've ever seen because he had like a bowl cut kind of thing on front and then like mullet in the back. But the fucking dude was awesome, man. Like seriously, like I thoroughly enjoyed their set. But for what they were doing, for what it was, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't anything that super stuck out to me. Everything they were doing very well. Just it wasn't anything that got me super excited. You know, I've certainly seen similar bands, you know, doing similar types of metal to what they were doing. But I should mention, like, the crowd was definitely there for them. And then I include myself in that. I was, you know, I was enjoying the set, but they definitely had a fair amount of support there. Like, it wasn't a thing where, like, only the headliner had support. In fact, I would say the crowd overall, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but overall, really good. Like I said, I enjoyed their stuff, but, you know, it didn't, like, holy shit wow me, but I did enjoy it. It was cool to see. The final band, the headliners, were a band called Escape the Fate. And when I saw that Escape the Fate were going to be the headliners on this particular show, I thought to myself, that name sounds familiar. I've heard that name before. So I don't like to look up music of bands that I haven't seen live before. I'd prefer to experience it. But sometimes I'll at least look up, you know, like visually what they look like. So when I looked up and I found like the first image that came up for Escape the Fate, I immediately was like, oh no! Because Escape the Fate came out in, I guess, like 2004, and then, you know, kind of seems like they had a bigger run kind of a little bit, you know, later in the 2000s, before the 2010s. And they basically were part of the whole MySpace core, sort of emo metal type of thing. That's not my jam, man. Not my jam at all. It was past my era. I mean, look, I'm a big nu metal fan, clearly. I fully take on every part of that, even the parts that are a little bit cringe and stuff like that, you know, people look back on and kind of joke on. So it is what it is. The emo MySpace core stuff, ugh, it's just not my thing, man. It's just not. I've always seen it as being sort of almost like the successor to like hair metal, and I don't like hair metal. So, but here's the thing: two things were working in their favor. Number one, the crowd was 100% there for them. Like the nostalgia for this band was hard, and that's not always the case. In fact, I did an episode not too long ago of Concert Confessions where one of the bands I saw was sort of that general thing called Vampires Everywhere. And nobody gave a shit about them. Not to be mean, but nobody gave a shit about them. Escape the Fate was not that way at all. The crowd was definitely there for them. People were fucking going nuts. And that, as being part of the crowd, was fantastic to see and to be part of. So, even though they were not my type of music, I did appreciate the energy and the love that the crowd was giving them. The other thing they had going for them was that they were genuinely really solid on stage. It wasn't by about the third song that they played, I'd pretty much tapped out on them. I did stay for the whole set, but by the third song, they literally had a song called "Live Fast, Die Beautiful," and I was like, that's about it for me. I'm gonna go sit down now. And I found a seat and I started editing through like all of the pictures and videos I'd taken. But to their credit, they did have a couple songs where, you know, I got my feet tapping and stuff. I was like, okay. Extra credit to their guitarist, man. They have a genuinely really good guitarist. And Zool, bless him, he was still rocking like the emo like flip hair where like every few seconds he'd have to like flip his hair out of his eyes. No joke. I 100% am for that, man. Because, like, again, I love nu metal, and nu metal has some of the wackiest hairstyles in all of fucking music, so I was for it, man. I enjoyed it. When he went over there and busted out a solo at one point during the set, that was my favorite fucking part. So Escape the Fate, even though they weren't really my thing, I did appreciate the performance that they put on, even though, again, I very much checked out of it at a certain point. But, like, again, I liked the performance that was there. It was good for background music, basically, for me at that point. And I appreciated how much the fans really liked it. Yeah. Speaking of the fans, let's talk about the crowd real quick. This was a great crowd. There were it was a Saturday show, so you had the advantage of, people were, free to do stuff. It wasn't like packed. Like I've seen the WC Social Club packed to capacity on a couple of occasions, and it's a thing to see. But this was definitely a thing where like from even pretty early on, initially I was a little bit worried because like when I first got there, I was part of like maybe one of like 10 people waiting outside for the show, and I was like, oh no. But people definitely piled in, and even though again I wouldn't say it was packed, like it definitely had a good response going for it. Um, Oh, I did want to mention one thing. Going back to Escape the Fate. Talking about one of the issues that I run into in WC Social Club that I've talked about in some of my other things. When it comes to the vocal mixing. The vocal mixing at WC Social Club can be not very good. And it tends to range pretty hard from band to band. But I've been to some shows where it was just abysmal. To their credit, Escape the Fate had some very good vocal mixing. And I figured out why, because when I looked over at the where they had like the mixing booth and everything for the show, they brought in their own people to do it. So the WC Social Club absolutely can get good vocals out of their setup, but it does seem like it's best suited if you have your own person or team to go over there and set up the vocals. And I don't want to shit on anybody or anything like that. Like I don't know how to do that stuff. I'm sure it's very difficult in its way. But I will say that the vocal mixing at the WC Social Club has been and it continues to be an occasional issue. So it's still a cool venue, but they need to work on that. I will say that. But yeah, the crowd was great. They were there for it, and they were there for every band. There was a little bit of drop off here and there, like when Renesans finished up. You could definitely tell there were certain fans who were just there for Renesans who left, but there was still a good assortment of people by the end, and they were very into it. And it was genuinely, even though, again, I did not give a shit about Escape the Fate at that point, it was a great fucking showing from the crowd. They were loving it. They were feeding off the energy. So, yeah. Let's talk about merch real quick, because I'm got to do things. So, I got a few things. First thing I got, boom, I got a Soulkiller shirt, because originally I figured I was just going to buy some Nini merch, but I had to for Soulkiller, and I love the design. It's very cool. And they're a local band, too, which was cool. I found that out. And I had to with this one, got my Nini shirt, which I love the design on this. It's very cool, and I guess this is tour exclusive, so that's really cool. Get a little bit of a thing. Also, I already had this, but I got my CD signed by all the members. This is the Nini music CD. This was put out before she was even on America's Got Talent, so a little bit of an OG hipster on that one. Then, when it comes to things that I found at the show, I got a set list from Renesans. I actually was going to hand this off to this one girl who was in the crowd who very clearly was a big fan of theirs. Because it just got left on stage. And I eventually asked one of the stage people, hey, or actually, no, one of the members of Renesans, hey, could I have it? I was going to hand it off to her because I'm sure she would have appreciated it. But I think that she left after the Renesans show. So, I also got the band list from the venue. They always put this up. So I went over there, and as I was leaving, I saw it was still up there. And I was like, hey, can I have that? And they said, yeah, it's fine. And then I got a guitar pick. I think this is the guitar pick from the guitarist for Renesans, because it was left on the stage after they left, and nobody saw it. Nobody came back for it or anything. So I eventually was like, well, I'm gonna grab it. So I'm fairly certain it was one of theirs. But let's talk about pros and cons real quick, and also give it a grade. In terms of pros and cons, Soulkiller was a huge pro. Finding them and also them being a local band was so fucking cool. They perfectly fit what I love, and I cannot say enough good things about what they were doing. Nini music was so fucking cool, man. That is genuinely like one of my favorite performances in a little while. And I say that there's been a lot of really good performances I've seen this year. So I loved what they were doing. I think they're going to be huge. And again, I really do hope they keep that band element intact, because I think they're really good. The crowd was great, man. Really, really loved it. Thought it was awesome. Just the energy, even again for the stuff I wasn't there for. Cons, I won't. Renaissance wasn't a con. They were fine. I didn't care that much, but they put on a good show, and I enjoyed it for what it was. Really, the only con was Escape the Fate, and that's just because I'm just not into that. Again, they didn't do a bad job. I just didn't give a shit what they were doing. So it was kind of a little bit of a disconnect. The first half of the show was definitely my favorite part of the show. The second half of the show was a little bit more like that. Okay, I paid for the ticket, so I'll stick around. But overall, it was really great. Another pro, I actually got to go over there and get a picture with Nini and the rest of the band, which was really cool. But yeah, no, overall, it was great. In terms of an overall grade, I'm going to go over there and give this one an A minus. I think that in terms of the overall, even though there were certain elements that didn't exactly work for me, because again, I'm not into Escape the Fate. Every band put on a really good show, and getting to see Nini and getting to find Soulkiller were so fucking cool. And overall, it was a great set. Even if again I wasn't that big into the headliner, I still enjoyed the hell out of it. I wouldn't see Escape the Fate again willingly, but if they were on like a band schedule or something, on a show that I wanted to see, they wouldn't dissuade me from seeing it. That type of thing. So anyway, that's the overall of this thing. I'm going to sign off here. It was a great time. Go out and support local music, buy merch, do all that cool stuff. Kick ass and take names, I guess. Bye.